Thank you for joining us from different parts of the world, especially thanks to our esteemed speakers who've made time despite their busy schedules. I'm Shruti, Senior Policy Manager at IWAGE, the Institute for What Works to Advance Gender Equality. And we are happy to be organizing this discussion, which is a part of the 69th session of the Commission on the Status of Women, which in fact commences today in New York. We couldn't be there in person, but we're extremely grateful to have had this opportunity to do it virtually. 2025 marks a very important year. It's 30 years post the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. And therefore, this year's CSW theme is also on reviewing the progress that we have collectively made towards advancing the goal on different goals on gender equality. With this background, our panel discussion today will focus on propelling India's care economy, which is also a part of taking our previous conversations both at CSW and several other platforms forward. And today's session, as you can see in the agenda, we will have two sessions. The first one will comprise senior government officials from India who will give us an overview on the strategies that they're looking at towards the implementation of the women-led development agenda. This will be followed by CSO leaders and thought leaders across both in India, regional and global levels who have played a very critical role in strengthening the care ecosystem. So without any delay, let me welcome the chair for our first session, Archana Vyas, Director, Program Advocacy and Communications, Growth, Opportunity and Empowerment at the Gates Foundation. Her work advances the goals of the foundation and its partners in areas such as financial inclusion, nutrition, global education, women's economic empowerment, and women's leadership. So welcome, Archana, and over to you.
Thank you so much, and it's a great honor to be here. I am joined with profound panelists, and I am looking forward to the discussions today. First, let me just introduce Srimati Smriti Sharan, who is Joint Secretary, Ministry of Rural Development. She leads policy, planning, and monitoring, as well as international cooperations, and Shama Prasad Mukherjee Urban Mission. In the past, she's held various positions within Government of India. She holds an MPhil in political geography from JNU, New Delhi. I'm also very delighted that Dr. G. Manjunath has joined us. He is Additional Labour Commission, Industrial Relations, Government of Karnataka. He holds a PhD from National Law School of India University, an MA in Economics, as well as Women's Studies from Bangalore University. He specializes in law against sexual harassment, industrial relations, and labor law jurisprudence, as well as informal labor and social security. And I am actually delighted that we're having a conversation focused on care economy today. Few framing remarks from me, and then I'm going to be asking my panelists certain questions so that they can share the intellect. I think, first of all, I would say that India's women-led development is a powerful catalyst for women's leadership across sectors as well as care economy. A recent report, shows that how investing in care economy can really be a game changer, not only for women's participation in labor force, but also improving child development and unlocking new economic segments. ILO actually suggests estimates are to the tune of 475 million jobs for women by 2030, but in India, this would mean about 11 million jobs and 70% of those to be held by women, as well as 2% contribution to the GDP. Again, we are in an intellectual setting. I would speak about more than 70 quasi-experimental as well as experimental studies in more than 30 LMICs actually show more than 90% positive results for positive impact of center-based childcare, not only for women's or maternal employment, but also child development aged 0 to 5 years. So really, it is a fact that strengthening childcare is not just social imperative, it is also economic. It economically propels countries as well, unlocking women's productivity as well as family incomes and improving, more importantly, improving even health and nutrition as well as development of children, what we really care about. My first question to you, Madam Sharon, you are part of a ministry that leads a significant program, NRLM, more than 10 crore women within rural, semi-urban setting, really engaged with women's, entrepreneurship, enterprise, and we know the fact that most of Indian women fall within the informal economy. At the same time, there is this vision that India is leading on women's led development, and there is also Viksit Bharat 2047, which is about how do we make India develop further. Now, how do these two converge within your own realm? And where is it that you see care economy fitting into the whole program? Your views, please.
Thank you, Archana, for that introduction, and good evening, panelists from across the world. My co-panelist, Dr. Manjuna, Radha, and a lot of people who work in the same sector. Thank you for inviting me, and I'd just like to add one more thing to what Archana has mentioned about my introduction. So while I've handled plan policy and other programs for the last 2 years, I'm looking after DNRLM, the Rashtriya Ajivika Mission, which of course makes self-help groups and empowers them for livelihood, and which today it is branded as one of the largest self-help group movement in the world, because I'll come to the numbers a little later. And it's an immense honor to be speaking here today as we mark 30 years of the Beijing Declaration, and we find ourselves reiterating our commitment on gender equality through the G20 New Delhi Declaration. I'll just give you a brief background. The United Nations Gender Snapshot Report 2023 says that by 2030, over 340 million women and girls could be living in extreme poverty, and 1 in 4 could face moderate or severe food insecurity. Women will continue to spend on an average 2.3 hours more on unpaid care work. And without urgency in action, we will take another 300 years. Not sure if any one of us will have that kind of patience. And therefore, there is a need for a very integrated approach for collaboration, for sustained funding, for empowering women and girls, and also exchange of knowledge, which will really make us bridge this 300-year gap which is being mentioned. So India made a commitment in the G20 declaration, and it said that it will work in the world of investment on social protection, affordable care infrastructure, and this will be ensured, we said. Before I move further, I will just give you a couple of numbers, and because we also have international audience, I would also like to mention these in million. So we have 10 crore rural women which have been consolidated into self-help groups, which essentially means 100 million rural women, and they have been structured into 9 million self-help groups, which is 91 lakhs. And this collective strength transcends economic independence and spills into social and political empowerment. Self-help groups have become a vital force in rural women empowerment. If these numbers are mind-boggling, I will also like to tell you that the government has provided 5.5 billion in capitalization support and another 113.5 billion US dollars in terms of bank linkages. Now, that is what is called a holistic development of the women and encouraging them to come into the working world or the entrepreneurial world. And at DNRLM, our approach has been to build on the foundation of economic empowerment and adopt a bottom-up approach to create enabling ecosystems. And we've done several things in this effort. So for example, we've made gender responsive community institutions, and we've made a pyramidal structure of these self-help groups so that the women have support at various levels and are continuously learning from each other as they go up the chain. So we have SHGs, SHGs are federated into VOs, and VOs are informal structures, and then VOs are federated into CLFs, and that's how we've created a three-tiered structure that has been gender responsive. We've got convergence platforms which facilitates dialogues between women's institutions at the panchayat and block level to solve practical issues through joint efforts. So what we ensure is that all women in a village can express their requirements in terms of rights, in terms of what they think are the entitlements or the requirements for the village. And we've given agency to the women so that these inputs are then woven into the village prosperity plan, so that the demands from the grassroots are really taken into account. We've had this very significant program called the Nai Chetna, which is literally translated as a new awakening. We've done 3 years of consecutive campaign on Nai Chetna, which is launched in December, on the same day as the International Day for Raising Awareness Against Gender-Based Violence. And over the last 3 years, we've mobilized 4 crore people with 12 lakh awareness activities. So while we are empowering women, we are also telling them what are their rights, how do they fight for their rights, and how do they recognize when things are not going right for them in terms of curbing their freedom, in terms of curbing their freedom of speech, mobility, or preventing them from taking what is rightly their due. Also, the self-help groups are self-reliant and financially sustainable institutions because we've structured them by providing them funds in perpetuity. So we do not give them any grants. Rather, we make them able to deal with their own money because these funds in perpetuity are literally their own assets, which they have to use, reuse, get the interest, and move towards economic empowerment. But there are several challenges despite this 100 million cohort that we've created, because women's labor force participation has been observed in rural areas. It's increased to 41. Earlier it was 27. And last decade or so has shown an increase, which is like a very heartening statistics to look at. So while this has been achieved, there is still more work to be done in the domain of women and work. For example, enhancing safety, access to social protection, enhanced decision-making, and redistribution of unpaid care work. We've just got the first summary findings of an impact evaluation of a World Bank partnered program called the NRETP. And while the data is still being refined, the preliminary findings do show that this rise in the labor force participation amongst women in rural areas can also be attributed to the DNRLM program, the Rashtriya Ajivika program, which has given women the confidence and the ability, financial as well as social ability, to step out of the house and to start working. But as has been set as a context, there is still a lot more work to be done on this. Well, just last December, we undertook a CS conference. It's called the Chief Secretaries Conference, where Chief Secretaries of all the states of the country joined together to talk about the issues which the country needs to tackle to make India a developed country. And Ministry of Rural Development had a small team which was working with a couple of states, and we too were seized with the same matter, where we realized that 44.5% of women cite childcare and personal household commitments as the primary reason for not participating in the labor force. This is the PLFS 21-22 data. While a good 33% cited that they wanted to continue further, but then 44% of the women is a large number. And during that CS conference, not just this, we also talked about the global scenario, and I shall come to that in a while. Therefore, during the deliberations, what we understood was that India not only needs to take care of its aging population, but also a wholesome development and all-round development for the children, and for which we will need to invest in care. And when we invest in care economy, the outcome would be that there will be more women freed up to take up work, which gives them economic returns. And to achieve one of this, also we are aware that to become Viksit Bharat, women and men have to have equal participation in the economy. And to achieve this, we have, under our NRLM program, taken very seriously the diversification of livelihoods and providing them insurance, reducing the risk, reducing the climate-related vulnerability, so that the women, once they've stepped out, have the confidence and the security to continue their work. And this initiative of giving them diverse livelihoods not only creates alternative sources of income, but also increases their participation in the labor force. Another significant program that the government has been working on is the Lakpati Didi. Lakpati Didi is a self-help group member who earns $1 lakh a month, which is roughly translating to 1,150 USD in a year. Now, this income is measured over 4 agriculture or business cycles, but if a woman is able to do this, then we understand that they are equipped to be in the economic sector. And now we have a target to achieve almost 3 crore Lakpati Didis in the next 2 to 3 years. Now, while we nurture these initiatives, we also have to unlock the potential of rural women to address the multiple demands on their time stemming from unpaid domestic core. A broader perspective is needed in finding solutions. While convergence is crucial, strengthening and expanding the scope of our work is also vital. And the best way to do it is innovation. Encouraging SHGs to provide care services or establish community-based care collectives can also be considered going forward. Honorable Finance Minister gave her budget speech, and there was one particular aspect which related to us, and it was a big one, which was building rural prosperity and resilience. We were given the mandate to organize a budget webinar, and we were scouting for social scientists and authors who could give us some key points, and we managed to bring Professor Karthik Muralidharan of UCSD onto a panel. And he cited a very interesting example from Tamil Nadu, where the Anganwadi workers were provided with just half a day of help by providing an additional woman member. And the results out of that were stunning. In fact, he's quoted to have said that the return on investment was almost 1,500 to 2,000. So just that additional input into an Anganwadi worker made such a difference. Therefore, convergence is really the way forward. Within our program, Mahatma Gandhi Narega is an employment program where we've ensured that at work sites, wherever there are infants or children, we set up small creches and we make sure that there is a lady who's responsible for it. And that ensures that women come out in large numbers to take advantage of this facility of wage payment. And similarly, in order to address the rising care demand for aging population, formalizing elder care through professional services can transform caregiving into a skilled profession, creating employment opportunities while reducing the burden of unpaid family caregivers, particularly women. There's an ILO report of 2018. I think Archana was quoting from the same report. And we brought this before the CS conference in December, where we said that Asia and Europe are home to some of the world's oldest populations, where Japan and Italy lead by 28% and 23% respectively. And learning from this, if we said that the same report says that in 2020, there were 1 billion people requiring care, and which will increase to 2 billion by 2050. Therefore, there are potential 475 million jobs in the care economy. And we took home the point from this set of data that not only do we have to be very mindful of what is the requirement within our own country, we also can invest in this sector, bring the right skilling and infrastructure investment so that providing care could be a source of income. And if women can take this up, women and men can take this up professionally, it's another option for livelihood creation.
Ma'am, fantastic. I am really inspired hearing the efforts made under your leadership with the NRLM program, not only access to capital, but also in terms of, the innovative work that you're doing through either providing diversification of livelihoods, as well as increasing women's productivity through Lakpati Didi and providing care services through creches.
So I just wanted to quickly give cite two examples which are homegrown, and after that over to
if
the
you can be
next
quicker,
panelist.
I want to even get Dr. Manjunath
of course.
as well.
So in Karnataka, Dr. Manjunath would be aware, Kusina Mane is a scheme which has a mandate to support working mothers through childcare infrastructure. And here there's a convergence with Ministry of Panchayati Raj and MG Narega. Also in Kudumshri, K for Care has taken up some novel methods for not just caring for elderly, but also for people with disability, for palliative care, and also taking care of children with special needs. So there is enough happening. I think
Thank
what
you
we
so
really
much.
need to
Yes,
do
and
is
it is a big program, 100 million women, and more to join, as well as increasing their productivity, and where the care support is going to be fundamental in terms of getting more women in. I'm going to invite Dr. Manjunath at this point in time. Dr. Manjunath, it would be great to hear about the work that the Karnataka government is doing, especially with regard to women's work and care economy, as well as, given your expertise in labor laws, would like to hear more about those as well. Thank you so much.
Good evening, Archana. Thank you, ma'am, for your insights. Before I start my presentation, this is for about 5 to 6 minutes. Since basically I am into the Department of Labor, regulating the workers, perhaps both in the formal and informal sector, the entire world of work is within the domain of the Labor Department. So let me give you a little bit of perspectives as to how care and women workers are inseparable. I'll give you 3 examples as to how care economy is so important. If you could, very recently we had Kumbh Mela, where there was a picture of a women police officer holding tight her own child. So the police officer on duty with the child and doing the performing the duty. And also we I think you must have also be aware about in Italian parliament, and member of parliament was breastfeeding the child inside the parliament, which received a lot of applause. And also during elections, in general elections in India, we see a lot of women government officials carrying their children and doing such type of care activity. So these are the examples of how care and women are inseparable. Now let me get into some of the data, because since Labor Department deals with both formal and informal sectors. In Karnataka, there are about 18,341 registered factories, where about 5.89 lakh women workers are working in these factories. Shops and commercial establishments, 4.82 lakh shops and commercial establishments are registered, wherein 19.32 women are working in shops and commercial establishments. Contract labor, there are around 2.29 lakh contract workers working in the state of Karnataka. That means to say, in the formal sector, we have 27.50 lakh lakh women workers working in the formal sector. So we don't have the data regarding the unregistered informal sector workers as to how many women are working. That means to say, large chunk of formal sector and informal sector women are working in the state of Karnataka. Now, how does the Department of Labor regulate issues pertaining to crash or issues pertaining to women and care work? For example, take for the example the Building and Other Construction Workers Act. We Government of Karnataka had earlier initiated 2 years ago 133 community crashes. So this was functioning very well, especially for the women who are working at the construction sites. And we had empaneled a lot of NGOs and civil societies to take care of this childcare activity. But unfortunately, this scheme of a community crash for the women construction workers did not proceed after 2 years because NGOs failed to get children from the construction sites. So that scheme which we initiated, which we received a lot of applauds from the women and things like that. Mobile crashes we were not able to run because they were not able to follow certain guidelines. Secondly, the Factories Act is a very important statutory legislation which empowers women, or which authorizes the employer to have crush within the industrial establishments. So all industrial establishment factories having 30 and above shall have crushes in their establishments. However, exemptions are given in certain factories which is hazardous, chemical oriented and things like that. But Factories Act also allows common crushes, where if there is a clusters of industries who are able to come together, whether in the garment industries or electronics. So the clusters of industries, if they come together and have a common crash where women can use such facilities, it is provided under the law, and women can use such type of common crash facilities under the law. As you know, unfortunately, the Karnataka shops and commercial establishments, where about 19.32 lakh women are working, doesn't have the facility for crash. So this is a lacuna in the law itself, where a lot of women working in shops and commercial establishment, including malls and other places, there isn't any statutory requirement for the employers to provide crash, which we need to seriously consider. Maybe even you can propose an amendment to the Shop Act where we can introduce such type of facilities. Very recently, Government of Karnataka also constituted a committee to come forward with a menstrual leave policy, which is at almost to be considered by the Government of Karnataka. And very shortly, the menstrual leave policy would be introduced in the state. So these are in general how the Department of Labor, which is basically interested with the regulatory mechanisms to implement certain schemes or certain welfare facilities for the women, especially with respect to care and care economy. This is my submission to the audience. If there are any questions, particularly with reference to the regulation of labor laws with a specific reference to women, I would be very happy to answer them. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Manjunath. This has been really great in terms of the effort, whether it is community crashes or, those mandated by law, especially in the factory establishment, that can really be those that can be really implemented to provide care to especially women within the formal economy. But also you're talking about informal economy, how much that needs to be done. But at the same time, I think care, as I said, is catalytic because not only women can work. Even I'm a working woman. I had my children. Once my children are taken care of, it just relieves a mother in terms of how she can be free and she can work, but also provides, especially with as more and more care support is provided, it is an economy in itself, and therefore provides immense opportunity. And ma'am had also spoken about um, it propelling economy, providing further opportunities for women to get employed. My quick question before I close, uh, the same question to you, ma'am, as well as to you, Dr. Manjunath. What do you think both of you have spoken about collaboration and efforts that have to be done collaboratively, whether it is funding, whether you've spoken about NGO sector as well. Quick response in terms of what needs to be done, because there are many people who've joined this discussion in audience. They would love to hear from you. What are the efforts and what's the support that may be required from the non-governmental sector so that the care economy can further be propelled? If you can quickly speak to that.
If I'm allowed to come in
Yes, ma'am.
first.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so my first worry is I was going through a lot of related papers, and there's something called invisibilization of women's contribution. First of all, a very strong narrative needs to be built, and which obviously will have
Right.
to work from the grassroots, that it's not okay to expect just the woman to take care of kids, elderly, household chores, etc. That's one. So that we have to tackle at the social level. But what is more important is that we have to leverage technology to understand what is working where and how can we replicate those. And if larger policy level initiatives are taking time to shape up, then
Right.
whatever is possible, we should be working in collaboration to make sure that reasonable answers are thrown up. But what is also very important is very serious investment in the infrastructure. And what is the gap in that investment in infrastructure? And then a possible policy-driven initiative for that. I think if we are able to do these 2-3 things, we will be able to cover up some time.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Dr. Manjunath.
Yes, Archana, it was a very important question which you raised. In fact, if we consider the female labor force participation, what is most important is the social change that is required both among the men and the women. How do we bring in such a social change? How do men participate in this entire care economy? And as you rightly mentioned, the involvement of CSOs and NGOs are so important because government cannot do everything on its own. We need to collaborate. And most importantly is, as Madam rightly pointed out, the synergy that is required between various line departments of both Government of India and state governments. There are so many schemes, so many issues that line departments does, like women and child, backward communities, education department, and Department of Labor. Department of Labor per se doesn't have any such schemes except under the BOCW Act, Construction Workers Act, things like that. We basically try to enforce whatever is there under the statutes. So the easy implementation of the statute, so that we make things easier for women to get into the labor market, and ask the employers to comply with the labor regulations in terms of the provisions that are available under the labor laws, are very important component to facilitate women in the care economy, so that more and more women would participate in the labor force participation. I think that was a very important question, and you rightly put so much of thoughts into my head as to how exactly we could come out with a formula so that more and more women would participate. Thank you very much for that question, and it keeps ringing in my head for entire day today. Yeah, thank you very
so
much.
much. Yeah,
Thank you so much, Archana.
Thank you so much, Madam Sharon, as well as Dr. Manjunath. If I'm to sum up, immense progress being made, but there's a lot to be covered. And I would say that it is a collaborative effort of governments, private, public sector coming together, academia, research, community as well, NGO, CSOs to deliver the vision of Viksit Bharat as well as women-led economy. Some of the areas that have been spoken about is men and women to come together, a narrative that is co-owned by society, leveraging technology which can fast-pace the growth, as well as investment that would be required in care economy because there's going to be a gap, but also coordination within the line ministries, center and state, with the labor ministry as a huge collaborator, as an enforcer as well in terms of policies that have been made to be implemented so that we realize the benefits of care, which as I said, is not only for women but also for early childhood development and a stronger nation. Thank you so much, Shruti. Handing it back to you.
Thank you so much to our chair and our esteemed speakers for so aptly laying the ground for today's discussion. I would now like to invite Radha Chilappa, the Executive Director of IWAGE, to please start with the second session. We will be taking questions towards the end of the session. Please type in your questions in the Q&A box and we'll try and take as many as we can.
Thank you, Shruti. We had some very good insights from the last session. It gives me a great pleasure introducing my three panelists. Kelsey Harris, a senior policy analyst at the Center for Global Development, Washington, D.C. For more than a decade, Kelsey has worked in various policy advocacy roles in gender, international development, and immigration in Washington, D.C., and she has extensive expertise in coalition building and project management. Before joining the center, Kelsey was acting Deputy Director of Policy and Advocacy at the International Center for Research on Women, where she managed We Prosper, a global coalition on women's economic empowerment. Warm welcome, Kelsey. Gala Diaz-Langor is the Executive Director, CPEC. Her work focused on doing applied research on gender and children's rights. She has authored over 50 publications on social policy in Latin America, including a book on early childhood in Argentina, a book on gender economic equity and G20, and a book on gender and labor in Argentina. She has also worked as an international consultant for several UN agencies and other international organizations and government of the Latin American region. Warm welcome to you, Gala. Sumitra Mishra, CEO of Mobile Creations, is a postgraduate in special education for persons with disabilities. Sumitra comes with over 20 years of work experience in the development sector in India. Her direct work experience with disengaged franchised communities of children and women have been the pivot of the strategic programming, fundraising, organizational development, and policy influence abilities. Sumitra has steered organizations through the process of program delivery and partnership, CSR development, strategic communications, and governance processes. Social justice for poor and excluded people is the fundamental agenda of her work. Warm welcome, Sumitra. My first question, I come to you, Kelsey. To begin with, we are keen to hear from you about the global perspective, especially on the advances made through the G20 and previous CSW deliberations. Also, we would like you to elaborate on the global roadmap for action on the care economy, which you have been working for many years now. Yeah. Over to you, Kelsey.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Radha. And thank you to IWAGE and to Lead at Career University for organizing this important discussion and for inviting me to share this global perspective on the care economy. As noted, I work at the Center for Global Development, where we have been focusing on the care economy as a critical lever to advance women's economic empowerment. I am also a Women 20 delegate and a co-chair of the W20 South Africa Care Economy Working Group, where we have been working to highlight care as a key component for gender equality within the G20. So this work on care has really gained momentum in the wake of COVID, as we've seen unpaid care and decent work beginning to be more recognized and policy gaps becoming more apparent and becoming to be addressed. And while there have been some very positive changes, there unfortunately are still insufficient care policies and systems around the world to address the fact that 76% of unpaid care is spent by women and girls, more than 3 times that of men. And the economic benefits of investing in care systems are clear. Unpaid care and domestic work equate to approximately 9% of the global GDP, which is about 11 trillion US dollars. And if investments in universal childcare and long-term care services are made around the world, the International Labor Organization estimates that that could generate a total of 299 million jobs by 2035, 3/4 of which would be held by women. And over the past couple of years, we have seen the care economy continue to gain traction and recognition within global institutions, which is wonderful. This includes the advent of the UN's International Day of Care and Support, which we're now celebrating every October 29th, plus a landmark resolution from the ILO in June 2024 on decent work in the care economy. We've also seen institutions like the World Bank and other multilateral developments significantly increase their investments on care. For example, as a result of the IDA-20 replenishment and related policy commitments back in 2021, the Invest in Childcare initiative was formed, which resulted in at least $180 million in new funding for childcare grants, and has seen exceptionally high demand at the country level for these types of investments. We've also recently benefited from lots of new data and evidence on topics like the return of investment on care. We've learned from one another at regional convenings, such as the Bali Care Economy Dialogue or the Care Economy Pre-Conference that Women Deliver in Kigali. The last several years, we've seen the rollout of national care policies in countries like Brazil and Kenya. This is a sign that care is being prioritized and institutionalized in a variety of contexts. However, the last few months, we have seen a huge hit to bilateral foreign aid as the US has shuttered the US Agency for International Development, or USAID. The UK has declared they're going to reduce foreign aid by down to 0.3% of GDP. And others have also announced that they're deprioritizing certain gender-related issues due to national politics. This is a very concerning development as bilateral and multilateral donors play an extremely important role in helping to support care services and infrastructure, for example, through investing in pre-primary education. So it's very important for all of us to continue the progress globally and in national contexts like in India, so that we can help maintain spaces to share best practices and research, and to continue this meaningful collaboration to create gender transformative care and support systems that meet the needs of all people at every stage of life. So as mentioned, I just wanted to highlight one tool that the Center for Global Development and our partners at CPEC, the Asia Foundation, Women Deliver, and the International Center for Research on Women have recently developed, and that is the Global Roadmap for Action on the Care Economy. The roadmap, or the GRAC as we sometimes refer to it, presents policy recommendations within a clear framework where we highlight existing metrics on the care economy as well as data gaps. And we've identified immediate actions that are needed in order for us to achieve set goals by 2030. The roadmap also highlights specific ways that we can elevate and integrate care in important forums like the G20. So we created this tool in response to the need to connect the conversations that are happening on care at different levels, at the national level, at the global level, multilaterally, and also clarify what we mean when we say the care economy. We also really wanted to promote this coordination and informed engagement and policy making at key global moments. We hope that this roadmap serves as a resource to policymakers, researchers, advocates, and practitioners alike, and also helps us to identify shared priorities and opportunities to amplify this agenda. So as a result of implementing these recommendations laid out in the roadmap, our vision is that some of these gaps will start to be addressed. We know that this will take time, but we really believe that with strategic and deliberate action, we can help to fill the gaps and to elevate these issues to make care a more central issue in policymaking and financing. And ultimately, this will help us all to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals and also inform the next set of global development goals, which will be in development over the next few years. So the roadmap is broken down into 4 important categories: investments, integration and coordination, policy change, and research and data. And there's policy recommendations within each of those categories. There's way too much for me to go into depth on today, but I did want to highlight just 2 recommendations that may be relevant for this discussion. The first is around the need to increase public expenditures on equitable quality public care services. And our goal is by 2030, it's a shared goal, is to reach 3 to 10% of national incomes on equitable quality care services, as well as 1% of national gross domestic product on pre-primary education spending, and 10% of education spending being allocated to pre-primary education. Most countries in the world are far below this target level. OECD countries spend an average of about 0.8% of GDP, while India, and that's on pre-primary education, while India currently spends about 0.1%, which is the 10th of the goal. So to meet this overall goal, we recommend that a plan be developed in national context and in local context to gradually increase the percentage of budget invested in public care services, early childhood care and education, and long-term care. We also recommend that this data be shared publicly on, how much public spending there is on all types of care, as right now it can be really difficult in many contexts to understand the amount of spending that is happening on care for children younger than 3 in particular, and for long-term care. And then the second area I want to highlight is the need for policy change around social protection systems. Strong social protection systems are critical to ensure both financial security and quality care. And special attention has to be paid to certain categories of workers that are often excluded from social protection systems, including those that are in the informal economy, those with disabilities, and the self-employed. This is extremely important in Asia, as 63% of women care workers are in informal employment. So by 2030, the goal is to see an increase in the number of countries that provide social protection benefits to more than 75% of their populations that require increased care and support. And types of populations include children, as well as people with severe disabilities. And right now, globally, the coverage rate is around 47%. So we still have a long way to go there. So these are just a couple of examples. Again, there's lots more details in the Global Roadmap for Action on the Care Economy. I encourage you to take a look at it. It will hopefully be shared out as a resource after this event, and anyone can feel free to also reach out to me directly if you have questions or want to discuss it further.
Thank you,
these, just a couple words to wrap up.
Yes.
With these as illustrative, I just want to close by highlighting how important 2025 is to propel this agenda forward. We're kicking off CSW today, and we want to be able to highlight these issues in the context of CSW over the next couple of weeks. But looking forward, we've got a number of really important moments, global moments, where we need to come together to collectively uplift policy and financing opportunities, including the G20 South Africa, the 4th International Conference on Financing for Development, which is in June, and the 2nd World Social Summit for Social Development in November. So I'm looking forward to collaborating with all of you here on this panel, and also hopefully those of you in the audience, and learning more about best practices and opportunities for India in the course of this conversation. Thank you so much, and over.
Thank you so much, Kelsey. Gala, coming to you, you have a rich experience working in the global South context, particularly in Latin America, on gender equality and the care economy. Can you share with us some learning and strategies around laying emphasis on care work in relation to women empowerment?
Sure, thank you. And first of all, many thanks, Radha and the whole team for the invitation. It is a great pleasure to continue to work together towards the continuity of care being global priority. Having Kelsey just stated the momentum for the care economy agenda at a global scale, I would like to focus on its relevance for the global South and for the Latin American context more in particular, as well as also some challenges and opportunities the care economy will face in the near future. As most of our colleagues today have stated, the importance of care is undeniable. The estimates show that unpaid care work, if compensated, would represent 9% of the global GDP. This is an equivalent of $100 US trillion. In Latin America alone, it would account for between 16 and 24% of the regional GDP. This would make care one of the largest sectors in our economy over most of the other individual industries. It is also clear that care is indispensable for the rest of the economy to work. There's no other activity that could be carried out if care is not provided. But as it was also mentioned, care and particularly the social and economic value of care remains usually invisible. The burden of both paid and unpaid care falls disproportionately on women and therefore constitutes one of the main drivers of inequality. Women globally spend on average 3 times more hours than men on care work, and in some Latin American countries, this gap widens, with women spending up to 7 times as much time on unpaid domestic and care tasks. In India, women dedicate 8 times more hours than their male counterparts to these tasks. This is a tremendously unequal distribution. And because of this reason, care also represents one of the main obstacles for women to achieve full participation in the economy overall, because the care burden limits the time that can be allocated to the labor market. Care is therefore considered a responsibility of households and within the households of women, and is taken for granted and therefore labeled as an exclusively women's issue. Addressing these inequalities should be a priority, not only because it is a moral imperative to secure and level the playing field, but it's also strategic. Care work is in itself an untapped source of employment, which is growing and will continue to grow given the demographic transitions and the aging of populations all over the globe. According to the World Economic Forum, many countries are facing a demographic challenge with birth rates falling below the replacement level of 2.1. The global population is expected to shrink after 2024, and as mortalities will surpass births, countries must secure growth through increased workforce participation or increased productivity. Even in younger populations, such as those of Latin American countries, the aging is happening faster than it was expected. Argentina is a crucial example there. Here, the number of people over 65 years of age was in 2020 equivalent to 18% of the working age population. But the existing projections forecast that it would double by 2065 and reach 50% by the end of the century. This is 8 years earlier than it was originally estimated. Therefore, the demand for care workers will be higher in the next years, and it is crucial to invest in care, not only to tap on these jobs that will be created to secure that those jobs are decent and of quality, etc., but also to tap on the other opportunities that demographic transition offers. According to the research we've done in CPEC, one of the main think tanks in Latin America, in Argentina, the fertility fell 35% between 2014 and 2022. This was mostly driven by a fall in teenage pregnancies, which is very good news since they are mostly unintentionally. In that same period, the fall in teenage pregnancies was of 66%. The implications of this is that the fewer resources are needed to cover education and other social needs and that many girls will not discontinue their educational trajectory. They will gain more skills and eventually be able to have decent jobs with good salaries. We can ensure that this opportunity is seized and therefore continue to build a prosperous and sustainable future if only we are able to secure an investment in public policies and strengthen the human capital and the care systems. In doing so, we would have benefits that could be seizable for all, not only for women. In this trajectory, incorporating men into caregiving tasks is indispensable to break gender stereotypes and socially assigned roles and to enhance women's opportunity to access other spaces such as the labor market. Women will be left behind if they are not released from the time poverty that leaves them with limited time to study, to go to the doctor, to work outside the home, to exercise, or to participate in any activities that are not domestic or care related. I would like to share some of the successful initiatives from Latin America. You may have heard of the care blocks or manzanas del cuidado in Colombia, or utopias or utopias in Mexico. Experiences such as these have demonstrated that the comprehensive approach in care services provision can be both highly effective and equitable, particularly when these responsibilities are shared with national and subnational private sector, public sector, and distributed within the families. Equimundo, there's another Latin American initiative which is also taken globally recently, which aims at fostering men's involvement in parenting and in guaranteeing the right to caregiving. And they have showed that in having a greater participation of men, they have also increased children's development. The cultural transformation can be accelerated through concrete policies, such as leave schemes based on shared caregiving responsibility between all of the responsible adults. When we recognize that men play a role in care, we can reduce violence and increase empathy too, creating a more inclusive models of masculinity, also to replicate it in future generations. Care needs need to be taken into consideration while calculating the global domestic products. We need better estimates of care and of the contributions of women to the overall economy. Designing and adopting specific care indicators can lead to a more comprehensive analysis of GDP that can also help to identify care deficits. The use of technologies such as georeferentiated maps of care can inform public policies. At CPEC, we have developed an indicator, which is the basic care basket, that contributes to a greater efficiencies in the allocation of public resources and can enhance the care system and make unpaid care work more visible throughout our economies. Prioritizing the care economy at the macroeconomic, policy, and cultural level from a holistic and integral approach, where the government, where businesses, and where the community can understand the importance and work together, is a crucial step to attain equitable and sustainable growth while guaranteeing everybody the right to give and to receive care. Many thanks.
Thanks, Gala. So I'm coming to Sumitra, to you now. From India's point of view, with the care economy emerging as a focus area, especially post the Indian G20 presidency, how do you think India is advancing on this commitment within the context of women-led development? Additionally, if you can share experience from your work at the subnational level. Over to you, Sumitra.
Thank you, Radha, and I hope you can hear me. Thank you, colleagues at IWAGE, lead at CREA, for giving this opportunity and for the wonderful honor to be listening to so many, experienced panelists on this subject. I will speak from the perspective of mobile creches, and we just celebrated our 56th year of existence during the past weekend, firmly working at the intersection of gender, labor, and early childhood development, mainly through the platform of creches for quality creches for children of women informal workers. And we've heard some reference to the informal workers and the labor statutes in India that provide for creches as a social protection entitlement under some of these statutes. Since G20, which was quite a momentous occasion for us to have the India presidency call out investment in care infrastructure as a means for achieving gender equity as a specific area of investment and policy attention, I will try and share from our experiences how, since the G20 presidency, what has changed over the last couple of years from the grassroots level to the national level and a few stakeholders. At the grassroots level, and this is at the community level, roughly in our estimate of the multiple state governments that we work with, we are seeing around 25,000 to 30,000 odd creches, childcare centers being publicly financed and supported through government funding, either through the national government or multiple state and district government levels across the country. So in a country as large as India, 25 to 30,000 is very few. And we know now an estimate of the number of creches that are required in the next 5 years for propelling women's labor force participation. But however, more number of services that are now being available is leading to a far greater demand. For example, recently in a study that we conducted in the state of Kerala and Odisha, Kerala being a highly educated, literate state and Odisha having lower education levels, women who were interviewed, between 75 to 85% of women, irrespective of their education level, stated that they need childcare services in order to facilitate their work, their entry back into the workforce, or for them to join the workforce. So really education or income level, as we all know, has very little to do with the demand for childcare in reducing the care burden on women. What's interesting at the grassroots level is also what we are seeing, that the local governance systems within the rural systems, the Panchayati Raj systems, and in the urban systems, the urban local bodies are getting activated, to think about more decentralized and devolved systems for childcare services, both from financing to governance of these systems at the local level. So that's very encouraging to know, because the closer we go to the communities, the more reflective it is of the cultural and the contextual needs for children and families there. At the state level, and a few state level systems where mobile creches is actively engaged with, we see policy development since the G20. Certainly, the state of Haryana has come up with its unique state creche policy. We see some programmatic development at scale. And Dr. Karnakar mentioned about Kushina Mane, and Smriti ma'am also mentioned about Kushina Mane, where within the MG Narega system, creches at scale is applicable. We've also seen a few schematic level developments at the state level. For example, in Odisha, the District Mineral Foundation has included childcare as a key component for very remote tribal districts affecting women and entire families, indeed, who are in the periphery of the mining sector. We've also seen now all these state level policies and developments, and it's very encouraging when we're talking of women-led development and how do we build an infrastructure for getting women back into the labor force. We're also seeing financing at the state level. Again, much to say in terms of the financing required for quality services, but there is a good start over there with states allocating budgets to match central government funding, states finding alternate revenue sources for supporting some of these initiatives. In fact, in village level planning at the local governance level, what we call the GPDP, the Gram Panchayat Development Plans, which is at the village council level, even there we are now finding in some of the areas where mobile creches work, we are looking at influencing PRI systems to allocate anywhere between 8% to 13% of their annual budgets towards childcare needs and early childhood development needs, which has been very encouraging. Of course, Kelsey mentioned some financing statistics in terms of what India is and what the global recommendation is, and a similar study that Alliance for Right to ECD did recently. We've looked at ECD within the child budget. We've looked at early childhood specific investments and early childhood sensitive investments, intersecting investments that affect early childhood development outcomes, and across central government and 5 state governments over a 5-year period. And we've seen that on an average, 0.7% of the union budget is going towards early childhood development investments, and 0.1% of the GDP is being invested in India towards the early childhood development initiatives. This is across line ministries, but also between the state and the central. At the national level, very quickly, of course, as we've heard so far, that care infrastructure, attention to care infrastructure at a policy level has come up in a big way. Just the fact that we've got Ministry of Rural Development and Department of Labor coming to talk about care is a signal that care is now getting more universalized, more mainstreamed across multiple policy conversations. Certainly at the central level, recently we've seen Ministry of Education and Ministry of Labor and Ministry of Women and Child Development coming together to talk about the reimagination of ICDS, the largest public provision for children under 6 years in India, and what is the possibility of the 4 to 5 hour services of ICDS can be scaled up as a 7 to 8 hours of full childcare services. We're talking about that. Palna, which is the Government of India program for creches aimed at children of women workers. There is a strong commitment of Government of India, and we see that as we work with state governments, where every state government is coming up with plans on how to implement the Palna program at the ground level, which means that the national government is also creating provisions for flexibility of how this program is going to hit the ground. Certainly, as mobile creches, we hear conversations in Ministry of Skilling and Development, Rural Development, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, certainly Ministry of Labor and Employment, Health and Family Welfare, besides the nodal Ministry of Women and Child Development, all talking about different lens and the convergence of looking at care infrastructure. I'm speaking about childcare particularly, and Niti Aayog taking a pole position in some of these conversations. And recently, Niti Aayog has shared its report where it estimates that India needs 3 to 4 million childcare centers in the next couple of years in order to meet its target for women's labor force participation. So with 1.4 million Anganwadi centers being, even if you assume that it's going to be fully universalized, there is still going to be a huge gap in meeting the childcare needs of the country, which means that we need multiple other stakeholders to come into fore. At the global level, Kelsey has shared a lot, and we've heard from Gala at the regional level, so I won't speak much about that, except to say that while the evidence is clear about investing in childcare and the ROI in terms of economic returns, the two threats that we see from a very subnational civil society perspective is that, one, in this whole women's economic empowerment dialogue, the child and the young child and the criticality of early childhood development, that dialogue and the nuances might get lost, and therefore financing for quality standards might get lost, but also the financing of public provisions for childcare is a big threat, and that we must continue to keep our eyes on. That's mostly about what is happening at the government level and through the multiple government levels. But just take a couple of minutes to talk about the non-state actors. Interestingly, we see a lot of philanthropic foundations now coming on board to think about care economy. So we've got philanthropic foundations who are investing at large-scale scalable pilots on childcare at rural tribal areas within the country. We've also talking to multiple foundations who are talking of care infrastructure through skilling. How does the child care entrepreneurship model works? What kind of cross-subsidizing and support is required? And certainly, as ma'am mentioned, care as an SHG enterprise, and what kind of models are being piloted in the country in the state of Bihar with Jivika platform, and very recently in Karnataka through the SHG model. There are some discussions there where private public actors are coming together to experiment and draw evidence from some of these pilots. But also these are pilots at scale and not just one or two programs that we're talking about. About the private industry, and Dr. Karnakar mentioned about the multiple employers and the employer industry. Now that's an area of concern because we don't have the standards and we don't have the regulations. We don't even have a registry to know how many such creches, whether it is for informal workers or high-end high quality private services. We don't have a registry. So that's an area of concern for us where both the state and the industry associations must come together to agree on standards, on an enabling regulatory framework and some kind of an accreditation system, but also for corporates to now bite the bullet when we're talking of women's labor force, increasing women's workforce participation, to make care, particularly childcare, as a part of their ESG mandates across companies, and to put where their policy says, put money where their policy commitment says, and that's something that we must all come together to track. Last closing comments from me. Some of this has already been spoken about, but I'm happy to hear the conversation starting from Smriti ma'am that care is about a gender transformative narrative, and that the care cadre must include men and women, and we need more men as models in the care, particularly in the child care space. So certainly raising the bar in the public narrative and the public imagination about childcare being a shared responsibility, something that India must invest in from the grassroots level, and thereby bring the cultural nuances, the contextual nuances about the diversity of this country in that kind of an imagination. Second, I think there is opportunity, far more opportunities available for generating more nuanced, granular evidence and data to experiment with many more models to look at the diversity of this country and keep going back to the communities, talking to the people on the ground about their expectations and aspirations and their challenges, and ensuring that the policy meets the demands and the needs from the ground. And in that, I was very happy to hear about the convergence of many non-state actors in the policy formulation. That's where I will end. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Sumitra. So the thing is, there are a few questions from the audience, and this is for Gala. So the question to you, Gala, is in what ways has CPEC been approaching contributing to care reform globally?
Well, thank you. It is a long question that I will try to answer shortly. We have had a very strong commitment and engagement in several international fora, mainly the UN and the G20. I'm also a delegate to the W20, and since 2017, and mostly since when it was the Argentine presidency, we co-led the T20 also. So based on that opportunity, we somehow seeked to hierarchize the overall gender equality, gender empowerment agenda in the whole process. We set up a task force in the T20, which was called the Gender Economic Equity Task Force. And we also searched to mainstream the gender perspective in all task forces. From then on, that was maintained in most of the presidencies. And we have also searched to participate in other engagement groups. In the W20 particularly, we have contributed to put care at the core of the analysis of gender inequalities, and also in putting forward concrete policy recommendations that can address the care gaps. We have developed and reviewed several policy briefs and participated in several high-level discussions, and particularly in the last years in the Indian and the Brazilian presidency. Since 2022, we have been coordinating a group of more than 20 organizations, including think tanks, international institutions, NGOs, and also organizations from the private sector from across the world to make care a global priority in the G20 and in other fora, and the roadmap that Kelsey has presented is part of the products that has been developed in those efforts. As Kelsey, well, and we call this the Care 20. It is not an official interest group. It was mostly pushed during the Brazilian presidency and will continue during the South African presidency. Building on the roadmap Kelsey has presented, from CPEC, we will continue to push our initiatives, the Basic Care Basket, and other initiatives to advocate for its implementation globally to reduce the gender inequalities and to increase the quality of care provision. We believe that in this context where multilateralism is being questioned, where there's a poly crisis, where there's a backlash on gender agenda, and particularly on the care agenda, and where there is an increased individualism, it is more relevant than ever to articulate a global action. The problems we're facing today are not local and not individual. They cross frontiers, they cross continents, and we need to discuss how we can provide a global action to effectively address these problems. And that is why we continue to work and to bridge both the national and the international debates, discussions, and actions concretely. Thank you.
Thank you, Gala. That's a question for Sumitra. Sumitra, the question is, what can be done to expand daycare creche facilities, much like the ones provided by the ICDS in urban areas?
Well, what can be done to expand that? I think it's one of the easiest, the first thing that could possibly happen at a policy level and policy financing level is to reimagine the ICDS, an already existing platform administrative structure right up to the community level, and how that can be expanded with additional workers, quality inputs, infrastructure support to become Anganwadi cum creches that will meet the poorest of the poor women's childcare needs. Also, there are multiple other models. For example, the Kushina Mane model, where Manrega is a statute over there. Similarly, the Haryana model, where the state government has a creche policy and wants to universalize creches across it. And there are multiple ways in which at the local governance level, right up to the state level, different government systems can come together. But also, because Dr. Karunakar is here, I want to seize the opportunity that there is a role for the private sector to play. And when I say private sector, I don't mean private affordable creches or high-end quality creches and those as enterprises for a certain level. I mean private sector who will employ these women. What is their obligation, and how can the state and the non-state actors help such employers, such industries, and such special economic zones in setting up quality childcare centers? It's a discussion where we need to engage with the private sector to understand what are their bottlenecks, what is stopping them from providing this, from safe mobility for their women employees to a childcare need. So that's another need where the engagement with the private sector is important. Lastly, and there are many ways, but lastly, I just want to say that from our experience of running creches and supporting governments in scaling up these creches, I want to say that even the poorest of the poor women will not leave her child, or a poor family will not leave their child with a creche, no matter how fancy and how nice it looks, and how much we say that we are giving this to you as a free or as a favor, and you must recognize. The first thing is the trust building within the community. So if we really want to propel demand for childcare, and if you want to respond to this already existing but invisible, undocumented, unevidenced demand, then we have to start from the community, where we build the imagination and the understanding of what a childcare center may look like, what quality means, what is the benefit to their children and to the overall family well-being, including the woman's well-being. I think these are some multidimensional strategies we must deploy in order to even if we take the Niti Aayog figure of 3 to 4 million childcare centers required in this country, is going to need multiple partners at multiple entry levels to come together. And then don't forget that if you're going to create this kind of demand and a service system, it's going to need skilled, trained cadre who will need that kind of skilling opportunities and accreditation. So it's the whole care infrastructure that is required, and the care governance system to hold both the demand and the supply and hold stakeholders accountable for it.
Thank you, Sumitra. Coming to you, Kelsey, can you throw some light on any future innovations on care economy that doesn't distress the already overburdened care workforce?
Sure. Thank you so much, Sumitra. I mean, I think there's just a lot of opportunities in the care economy, and I think we continue to learn from one another on these types of innovations. The care blocks in Bogota were already mentioned. I think that's an incredible example. Another example that comes to mind that I think we hear a lot about is the Kidogo model in Kenya. This is an entrepreneurship model where female entrepreneurs, mothers, are trained to have their own daycare businesses in the home. And they're equipped with the skills needed to successfully run these businesses. They have sort of these collaboratives where they can learn from one another, and they own this franchise. So it's a scalable model. And this is also being tried in other contexts in Africa. However, context is super, super important. What works in one place might not work in another place. Even, if you're talking about rural African contexts or rural Indian contexts, one thing that works in one rural context may not work in another because of preferences. So it's really, really important just to investigate, what women want, what mothers want, what fathers want, and continue to publicize those preferences and learn from their desires when implementing policy solutions. I also think we can learn a lot from one another. I've already learned a lot just in the course of this conversation. There's a lot of research and studies that are happening at different levels. There's lots of opportunities to scale these different innovative models, from the care blocks to the mamapreneurs. And I think the World Bank is also doing some really interesting research to identify, new models that might work. So, I think it's just important to continue to have these spaces where we can share these opportunities and publicize them even further.
Thanks, Kelsey. So my last question to all of you is, any closing remarks you'd like to give, and starting with Sumitra, Gala, and Kelsey?
Closing remarks, the timing is right. The spotlight is on care. We have to seize our opportunities, but this is the time to speak with each other, learn from each other, and build a collective movement. Particularly in India, I am very, very optimistic that this is going to lead to something substantial, both at the state level, but also the non-state actors, including the civil society and the private corporations.
Thank you, Sumitra. Gala?
So my closing remarks would be first to thank for the space. I believe that in this context of global backlash, it is more relevant than ever to hold these conversations and to focus on where we can make changes, where change can happen, where there can be a positive construction, and focus there and to be creative there. Sometimes the entry point is to substantially show how families can improve their livelihoods by the implementation of these policies. Sometimes it is job creation. Sometimes it is other types of benefits that we can showcase that arise from promoting better care policies. But we certainly need to be more connected than ever and more creative than ever. Thank you.
Thank you, Gala. Kelsey, your closing remarks, please.
Thank you. And Gala, so well said on that. I would just say, given the backlash, especially coming from the United States right now, there's a lot of challenges that we have ahead in order to continue to lift up this agenda. So we need to come together and collaborate as much as possible. Care is really a bipartisan issue, an all-partisan issue. Everyone needs care. Everyone will have to give care at some point in their life. And I really just want to reiterate that the global space is going to be super important over the next few years for us to be able to learn from one another and to affect change. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelsey, Gala, and Sumitra. And we had a very interesting insights from all the panelists. And I would quickly like to summarize some of the critical points. Around the world, the care has gained momentum, and various government and stakeholders are taking many initiatives. Care is also a source of employment. However, to propel care, we need better indicators, we need technology to inform public policy and more investment. It is also important to engage men in care. This has a larger impact in creating a more inclusive society. Also, convergence between national, subnational, and local government is the need of the hour. And the thing is, the time is right. We need to build a collective movement and have more innovations on care. For high-wage care remains a strategic focus, and we have been working closely with governments, partners, partner organizations, United Nations, civil society organization in advocating to bring care to the center stage, which would thrust the needle towards increasing women's work participation in India. Today's discussion has been a great value for us, and we would definitely support high-wage in further strengthening its advocacy agenda in care. On behalf of IWWAGE, I would like to thank all the panelists, moderator, and the participant for being with us this evening. With this, we close this session. Take care and see you in another